Okay, first, I apologise. We've had to hold this last media conference in this courtyard. As you're aware, there have been some threats made to members of Parliament and to their spouses and to their children, and so it's necessary to have just a little bit more security around what's going on. With respect to that, can I just simply say it's been an ugly, a nasty end to this election campaign. To issue death threats is a serious matter, and the government and the police are treating this in the most serious and responsible way. And unfortunately, this campaign's had a number of other incidents that have gone on. Even just this morning, an angry group of protesters blockading my electorate office. And that's happened repeatedly throughout the campaign, as have attempts to blockade my own home. Other members of Parliament have experienced similar events. And indeed, even in the pre-polling that's been going on, we've seen union strongmen trying to intimidate voters. So can I say to voters tomorrow, do not be intimidated. You will see union officials standing around at polling booths trying to scare you. Please do not be scared. Don't take any notice of them. That is not the Australian way. It's not what this country and this state stands for. And people should not have to go through that. We should be able to exercise our democracy and have a vote in an open and friendly way. That's a great part of the Australian community, a great part of Western Australia. Unfortunately, in the last few days in particular, that has been compromised. And I think also this week we've seen a very clear example of what Western Australians can expect if a Labor government is elected here. The comments made by Fran Logan that were publicised quite widely, a union official, former union official, basically threatening a company and threatening people's jobs, implying over the Row 8 project, if the companies see their contracts torn up by Mark McGowan and if they seek to get some sort of compensation, that a Labor government will pursue them and basically will prevent them doing any other work on government projects. That is corrupt, that is intimidation, that is threatening behaviour. And if you want to find examples of that, look at some of the events and what's gone on in the Labor-controlled, union-controlled states of Queensland and Victoria in recent times. We do not need that sort of intimidation and bullying tactics applying in Western Australia. I think the other aspect I'd like to comment on is the costings. I've got to say, the Labor costings and their process is beyond a joke. It's actually embarrassing that a potential government would behave in that way. I remind you, the Liberal Party has detailed all of its now over 70 election commitments. As we've done that, we have costed them and we have said where the funding is coming from. We submitted that last Thursday to Treasury. We've taken a number of days, quite properly, to go through and examine every single commitment the Liberal Party has made, to check the costings, and they have basically verified what we've done. And our costings show that in the next term of government, we will return to a balanced budget and a small surplus. Won't be easy, take a lot of discipline within government. It also shows that we will reduce state debt by $12 billion. We will solve the financial issue. In fact, with the half sale of Western Power, we'll basically solve that overnight. The Labor Party costings, as they are called, do not do that. They have a very flimsy, unbelievable approach to trying to balance the budget, which I shall return to. But on debt, our debt soars above $40 billion with nothing to show for it, nothing at all, and will continue to rise. They have no credible financial plan at all. And that's now been recognised nationally as just unbelievable, unachievable. I want to comment on a couple of the specifics in terms of how they say they're going to return the budget to surplus. Donald Trump uses the word fake. These are fake costings. They are nothing less than that. They have been cobbled together by a couple of Labor Party supporters and then put out there with little or no time for anyone to properly scrutinise them. And I'll give you some examples in that. It talks about, for example, Medi hotels. Mark McGowan's talked about his Medi hotels repeatedly through this election campaign. You look at the costings, how much is there? $500,000. You can't build a decent shed for that, let alone a Medi hotel. It is simply not there. He talks about $750 million of savings from public servants. but there is no allocation for redundancies. So if you're going to make $750 million of savings in the public service, you have to sack 2,500 public servants at least. You have to sack them. And where is the public service unions today? Where's Tony Walkington? Spoken to her, heard from her? The public servants unions are just simply lying down, saying nothing. And if you look at other aspects, Mark McGowan claims he's going to take $1 billion of Commonwealth money earmarked for Row 8 and Row 9 and reallocate it. Well, the Commonwealth said you can't, and by the way, Mark, you don't have the money, neither do I. The Commonwealth hasn't given it to Western Australia yet, so you can't reallocate something you haven't got. On drugs, and I'll leave that to Lisa, he talked about methamphetamine. We put out a detailed policy of policing and care and rehabilitation, properly funded. What Mark McGowan has put out just simply doesn't appear. Metronet, you know, the great program that Mark McGowan's been talking about for years. Where is the funding for Metronet? Where is it? It is based on these artificial savings. It is just not credibly funded at all. And remember the proposal, a bad idea, that we're going to have a factory producing rail cars in Western Australia? Not a dollar for it. How do you build a factory? How do you recruit workers? How do you train them? It's completely dropped out of these promises. And even at a regional level, Mark McGowan went out and promised to the people of Bunbury he's going to spend $30 million on upgrading the Perth to Bunbury rail service. It's gone. Sorry, people of Bunbury, it's gone. It does not appear. Just simply dropped. And you can go on and on and on. Even last weekend, Mark McGowan went out to the RSPCA. I'm a vice patron of the RSPCA, and Lynn and I are great supporters of the RSPCA. He promised them $2 million. It's gone. It's not there. It's not in the costings. And you can go on and on through this flimsy little document put up by a couple of Labor Party mates. It is an insult to the West Australian public, an absolute insult. And frankly, it's an insult to any commentator, any economist, any analyst, any journalist. You are being absolutely taken for a ride on this. This is not properly put together. It has no financial standing, and all of those commitments, a whole lot of them, have just simply been dropped overnight. That is what Mark McGowan has done. It is a fraud politically and a fraud financially on the people of Western Australia. So what's the alternative? What's going to happen if the McGowan government is elected? Well, you can let debt go through the roof. Debt's higher than I like now, but it's not out of control, and we have a clear plan to reduce it dramatically. Under Mark McGowan, there is no plan at all, no acknowledgement that we need to deal with our debt situation. Completely ignored. So what's left? You can't let debt go through the roof because you'll absolutely get downgraded, incredibly downgraded on credit ratings if that happens. What you'll then see is, well, taxes, fees and charges. They're going to go up. They have to. They have to. Mark McGowan cannot balance his budget without massive increases to the cost of living of West Australian households and extra imposts on the business community. And again, just on that, the false claims being made. The Shadow Treasurer, Ben Wyatt, apparently went out in the last day or so and said this government put up payroll tax. No, Ben, we haven't. That's a lie. A blatant lie in the last days of the election campaign. We've actually reduced payroll tax through our time in government, given rebates, reduced rates, raised the threshold and so on. So these lies are just being perpetrated on the people of Western Australia, and it goes on and on. So tomorrow, when people go out to vote, I say to you, do not take your vote in a casual way. I know we've been in government for a long time, but we have been a good government. You haven't had the scandals you had under Labor. You haven't had the Corruption Commission inquiring into ministers and forcing them to resign. You haven't had squandering of public money. You haven't had wasted projects. We have spent money well, and yes, we've had to borrow because we don't get the GST revenue that the other states get. When Labor were last in power in Western Australia, they got treated the same as other states. We've had to endure that collapse of GST revenues. We've had to get through the global financial crisis and the rise and fall of commodity prices. But where is Western Australia today as an economy? We've had the biggest growth in employment in the last month's statistics. The economy is coming back, as it always does. This is a resilient economy. We've had real growth of over 40% in the last 8 years, the strongest growth amongst any Australian state. We account for now over 40% of Australia's exports. more exports than New South Wales, Queensland and Victoria put together, done by little old Western Australia. We lead the nation in that, and we will lead. And we've outlined detailed plans of growing some of the other sectors of our economy. We have to keep mining and petroleum strong. It's still growing, but it won't grow as quickly as it did. We made big investments already into agriculture. Labor, they oppose most of the agricultural plans that we put forward. We made big investments into the City of Perth and developing tourism and science, trade into the Indian Ocean rim areas, clear way forward. And just mention tourism. Mark McGowan, you've heard me before, opposes Elizabeth Quay, opposed the stadium, opposed some of the hotel developments this state's got underway. And yet in this campaign, he went to the tourism industry and said that he's going to spend over $400 million on tourism marketing. Well, hang on, I flicked through their costings, nothing. Not a word said, not a dollar allocated, just not there. So I know you haven't got much time for the public or for the media or anyone wants to analyse these things because it's a flimsy, fake document and it's an insult. It's an insult to the people of Western Australia. So I'm pretty angry about that. I'm angry about the disruption to this campaign. I'm particularly upset about the death threats, not for myself. Lynn and I have been through that a number of times, but I think for younger members of Parliament, for their husbands, their wives, their children, that is incredibly distressing. That is not the West Australian way. And I'm upset about the intimidation and the threats made by Fran Logan. And you'll see a big police presence around today. What a waste of resources that is. And that is because of the action of these strong-armed people within the union movement and some of the outrageous actions by protesters who have insulted their fellow West Australians and behaved badly. So that's where it is. The election's tomorrow. We have been a good government. This state has been well run and it's prospered through difficult times. And yes, people have lost their jobs, there's some unemployment. That's the nature of this cycle. Our economy is now coming back and strong. It will stagnate under Labor, and please, please don't vote for a return to Dullsville, because that's what you will get under Labor. A dull government, a government completely controlled by the unions, and we've seen evidence of that in the last couple of days.